Hello and welcome to the 11th episode of the Pepper Podcast. For those who are returning, welcome back. And if you are new, the Pepper Podcast covers a wide range of spicy events that occur in our daily lives. Two high school students tackle heated topics through discussion. I am your host, Jay Mehta, and joining me is my co-host, Andy Watananoskunpen. And today's topic will be centered around COVID-19 and its effect on the school culture. The website OneClass surveyed more than 14,000 freshmen, sophomore, and junior students about their fall 2020 experience. Students from 232 colleges, both public and private, responded to the survey. Around 85% of respondents said that the pandemic had a negative effect on their performance. Another 9% said that the pandemic didn't affect their performance, and around 5% said that the pandemic had a positive effect or influence on their performance, which shows that there really is there's been negative effects through
Yeah,
a lot of ways that has affected the school life.
yeah, and I think that after coming out of the pandemic season, the when it was at its peak, we were all virtual, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's kind of a shared experience amongst many people and many students in the world, and especially many students in the U.S. And that COVID year has been, to be honest, a blur for
Yeah, to be honest.
like second half of my ninth grade year up until like now, like it's still a blur to me, like yeah. And so I think
It
that
was just like 2 weeks, you know what I mean? And then
yeah,
now
no,
it's
yeah, exactly. And I think that everybody has their differing experiences and opinions on the pandemic and virtual school, et cetera, et cetera. But, today's episode, we're just going to look at the research and what the data states
mm-hmm.
and kind of analyze it from there.
Yep.
Okay. So just to start off, I know that once we got back from virtual schooling, I was I did not really know how to act around my friends or like people that I hadn't seen in such a long time.
Yeah.
Number one, because I hadn't seen them in such a long time. It's always kind of awkward, but also because, um, you know, staying at home for that long kind of stunts your mental and social development. That it's kind of crucial that you be in person for that, that you develop in person with your peers like that. And a lot of the time, right?
Mm-hmm.
I find myself in like this is familiar, but I'm kind of disconnected from this kind of interaction, and
Yeah.
that's gonna have a negative toll for classes to come in the future. Because once you're stunted, it's hard to like
Recover.
make up for that.
Yeah.
Yeah, recover from that, and also be at the same level and progress in that way.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
Yeah.
so that's something that we looked into, and the mental development is basic. It's pretty clear that something kind of went wrong with the development socially for the short term, but also for the long term. Like I know that I've improved, and I'm sure you have too.
Mm-hmm.
But it wouldn't be it's not on the same level as it would be if we were in person for these past few years.
Yeah. And not to mention, right? Um, like being or COVID has really stunted, like you said, growth mentally. And that
Hmm.
shows through like grades really took a sharp decline
Oh yeah.
throughout COVID year. And I guess something that I want to clear up is virtual school is different really for everybody. For me personally, it was the I guess latter half of my ninth grade year. Co-
Yeah.
um, Pretty much halfway through my sophomore year, and since then I've been in person
Yeah.
through hybrid scheduling. But yeah, like grades really took a sharp turn or a sharp decline.
Yeah.
Um, I guess like you said, socially, there are a lot more statistics about depression and just overall negative social um just like as aspects of society,
Yeah.
considering
Yeah. I agree.
you're just so
Yeah.
used to being on a screen, just looking at your computer for a few
Yeah.
hours, then because you're like halfway, because like there's like the joke about people being dressed like halfway up, and then they're like in
Mhm.
their like
Yeah.
in their like
Yeah.
night dress in the in their like what bottom half, but
Yeah. I mean,
like
I'll admit I did that too.
yeah,
So.
yeah. So like, I mean, it did cut down my school time and things like that, but it also made me feel like a lot more different as a person.
Yeah. No,
When
I
I came
agree.
back, right, I felt really almost awkward, and I felt like I had to really relearn what was going on. Not
Yeah.
to mention, right, like students should continue. I guess like they should continue going to the school rhythm, in order to like keep their mental state um I
kind
guess
of
oh
healthy.
yeah, I guess keep them
Yeah,
accustomed to what it
yeah,
used to be.
I agree.
But like long screen time and insufficient like outdoor activities can severely affect like children's eyesight. Appropriate eye protection
Yeah,
measures
yeah.
should be implemented and things like that. I feel like eye protection should be implemented. We are in a um right now we're in a healthcare shortage and we're in a worker
Hmm.
shortage, and so there's things that aren't being prioritized. Um, so
Yeah.
like again, there's an article, the effects of online homeschooling on children, parents, and teachers of grades 1 through 9 during the COVID-19 pandemic, and so it
Hmm.
really showed that there's a lot that's going on behind the scenes compared to just you know COVID. It's a combination of so much that
Hmm.
has just happened because of COVID that it's hard
I
to really
agree.
pinpoint it on one thing. It's multifarious.
Yes. And I think that, a lot of times when we talk about how COVID affects schooling and education here, we kind of focus too much on online schooling and we don't talk about like when people are contact traced or when students miss school because they're infected. Like, yes, it's on a lesser scale because not everybody is at home and suffering from online learning.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like more like individual or like a small group of people, but it's still something that should not be overlooked. And for me, for my ninth grade year, the which was like when COVID started hitting in the US for the first time, my grades, they didn't drop because of the way our county did. They added points to my
Mm-hmm.
grade it's like a participation thing, which personally I don't really think is fair, but that's how they did it and how make kids accountable. And so I took advantage of that. So even like in my 10th grade year, when most of the year was fully virtual, my grades were fine, but I can say that the majority of kids saw a decline in grades. And that's to be expected, right? You're accustomed to learning in in-person environments. You learn better. Most people learn better,
Mm-hmm.
and you can interact with people like that, interact with the work, and it's like you're spending way too much time focused on a screen, and you also have all these distractions around you, like phones,
Yeah.
TVs, just like people at home, in general. And because you feel like you have that freedom subconsciously to distract yourself from that when it actually negatively affects you. And also on top of that, I think that special education was
Mm-hmm.
very affected by
Yeah.
COVID-19 because special education programs in schools, right?
Mm-hmm.
They're a lot of times in person and like kinetic. So the people want to be able to interact with the kids like that. They learn like that,
Mm-hmm.
and touching is like touching things and like interacting with objects is a big
Yeah.
part of learning with like special education programs. So
Before
COVID
you go
actually,
there,
yeah,
I
yeah,
want to touch back on a point that you mentioned before. So about like like people learning and things like that, but not being able to learn to
uh-huh,
the full extent. Not to
yeah,
mention, cheating also became very prominent during this time. So people really didn't have, I guess, the work ethic or the
yeah.
drive
No,
to
I
learn
I
as much
completely
as,
agree.
and same happened with me. I felt a lot more fatigued when because you're sitting in front of a screen all day. It's very, it's
Yeah,
just more
yeah.
like mentally draining, and
Hmm.
so um a lot of people just really resorted to, I guess, cheating. And so there's an NPR
Yeah.
article here that says, as college moved online in the, I love this article, by the way. As college moved online in the COVID-19 crisis, many universities are reporting increases, sometimes dramatic ones, in academic misconduct. At Virginia Commonwealth University, reports of academic misconduct soared during the 2020-21 school year to 1,077, more than three times
Oh
the previous year's
gosh.
number. And so at the University of Georgia, cases more than doubled from 228 in the fall of 2019 to more than 600. In Ohio State
Oh my
University,
gosh.
reported incidents of cheating were more than up than 50% over the year before. And so really cheating has been such a large I guess has been something that has impacted I guess school learning. And so while grades may reflect like, I guess, a high standard, what like
Mhm.
really is going behind the scenes is maybe is there are, and of course there are
Yeah.
people that are learning fully, and they are taking the time to read books and things like that to keep themselves educated, but a good portion of people chose to instead cheat, and so when people had to go back for state testing and things like that, counties and at least the state of Tennessee, performed very poorly this year. My school performed probably, I think it was like some of the worst numbers we've ever seen.
Yeah.
So it was very difficult for people to focus, especially because like there's the mentality of, oh, it's not counting, so it doesn't really matter.
Yeah, like it doesn't
Um,
matter, but in reality, it actually builds off of your knowledge. It's essential for the future success of your academic career. You know?
yeah, yeah,
Yeah, yeah, I can say the same thing for my school as well. If we pretty much we take pride in our academics at our school. I mean, a little too much, in my opinion. But that's a school I go to. They specialize in that, whatever. So we dropped 4 national rankings from like third to seventh because according to my principal, some seniors thought it would that it didn't really matter, so they just didn't take the AP exam. But they took the AP test. They took the AP test, but like they bombed it, and or they just completely like left the AP exam, and so like that dropped us down a few points, which like doesn't really matter to me. But um, and I agree with you with the cheating part. Cheating I've definitely witnessed. I literally witnessed the cheating happen, and I'm like, are you kidding me? Like just
yeah,
because you can, doesn't mean you should.
yeah. And
Because number one, right?
COVID really enabled that opportunity too.
I agree because like it's so tempting
Yeah,
to like, pull up the other browser or use your phone and type in the question. But like you're not necessarily learning.
yeah,
You're not you want to learn. School is for learning and education you build off of the foundations and you build up and up and up and up and up. So if you cheat, it's like you're not actually learning that material and it'll
yeah,
actually offset you and harm you the most. And it's a really it's like another pandemic, a pandemic of cheating during the COVID-19 pandemic.
yeah,
So like, and that article you mentioned, I think is also really interesting and kind of unveils the truth that really what virtual school, the ugly side of online schooling, which like you can look at the positive sides, like adaptability of students being able to switch from in person to a virtual setting and work via that, and kind of like testing out what would happen if we had to go virtual again. But also, it is also negative that happened. Academic integrity is tested very severely there. And then also like attention span and distractions. And like,
yeah,
I will admit, I was distracted a lot because like my phone was right there,
yeah,
but like I only did that for a few times. And then I was like, maybe I shouldn't be doing this. So I tried to like keep my phone in another room and focus on school, which was definitely hard. So like,
yeah.
yeah, it's had a lot of effects,
And
good
I
and
guess if you want to touch upon like because I apologize, I cut you off, but I guess you're talking about the
it's all
special
right. It's all
education,
right.
and then
Hmm.
after that, I want to explain a little bit of nuance. So go ahead.
Yeah, and I was just gonna talk about like special education in schools, public schools and private alike. And a lot of special education actually happens at home. I did not know that necessarily, but like a lot of it, like they have the caregivers come over and then they'll help them like learn basic education uh,
Mm-hmm.
things. And so when COVID came around, and that a lot of that human interaction was limited because of the liability and like the priority of health over everything else, right? Like
Yeah,
I would prioritize people's lives over those things too. It really stunted students in special education programs more so than no, students who didn't necessarily require that,
yeah,
who were kind of able-minded in education, because like it affected them physically, it affected them emotionally, academically, mentally. All those developments were delayed, and so they're already at a disadvantage. So disadvantaging even more will set them up for like a future that is really harder than it is already.
yeah.
And it's just really like disappointing to see. But what can we do if like a pandemic we can't control?
Mm-hmm.
You know. So yeah, I
I
just wanted to
agree.
say that, especially with like students with autism. I have a lot of friends who have autism, and they have a lot of therapists, and a lot of times they had to switch to in-person therapy, or like in-person like yeah like therapy. But like it was really hard for them. They were telling me it was really hard because they felt so much safer and open to sharing how they were feeling and getting that treatment if they were in person. But like a lot of the protocols necessary to containing COVID-19 and lessening the deaths of and infections of COVID-19 was, virtual stuff.
Yeah, and I definitely have to agree with you. There's been a lot of, I guess, like cognitive impairment throughout COVID, but it was especially was, I guess, what was especially affected was the special education area. But I guess I want to explain a little bit of nuance. While um, I guess in person learning while virtual learning was um, I guess negative for like cognitive aspects and things like that, it
Yeah,
really gave a realization that like in person school isn't really needed to learn.
yeah,
And so there were people that enjoyed virtual learning. I mean, I'm not going to lie. I enjoyed virtual learning to an extent. Um, I would personally prefer if I had to like choose, I would choose like 3 days virtual and like maybe 2 days in person. Um,
yeah, like a hybrid schedule.
yeah, like a good
I
hybrid
agree.
schedule just in case I need to do something. Um, because I felt like a lot of the work that I was doing could have been done in another place.
I
And
agree.
so my school day was really cut down from because we were allowed to leave. Some teachers let us leave if we finished all our work and, did our assignments
Hmm.
and things like that. So I cut my school time from 7.5 hours or so, which is the average school day, to
Yeah,
like 4 or 5 hours. Like
I agree.
there was
Yeah,
a there
yeah,
was a large difference in the amount of time that I was spending, doing my work. I mean, the amount of time that I was spending on my work was around the same.
yeah.
It's just that I was able to devote the time that I would normally be in school to other things while accomplishing the exact same amount of work. And so there was a realization, at least personally for me, that hey, do I really need in-person school? Do I need
Yeah.
to learn this way when there might be another opportunity? And that opened the that like I guess like and that not everybody thinks that way. There are people
Hmm.
that do need um they need in-person school to learn.
Yeah, no, I agree.
For some subjects like hard AP classes like AP biology, that's definitely the case in my opinion. You need
Yeah,
one-on-one instruction
yeah.
for those kinds of things. But there was a real big realization that do we really need in person to learn, because I mean some grades reflected that, and again that could
Yeah,
have been
I
through
agree.
cheating and things like that,
Yeah.
but there was for a okay or a decent amount of the population size, there was like people were meeting their grade level marks, and it
Hmm.
wasn't super out of the norm.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. And my brother, he has ADHD or like an ADD. So,
Hmm.
a lot of students who have that, 70% of students with ADHD have other conditions such as learning differences, oppositional defiant disorder, or depression, and they may have very different responses to like an at-home setting for learning because like it's already hard for them to kind of adjust to that environment at school where it's kind of like everybody else is fine but then they're already at a disadvantage and so they have to make up for that with like 504 plan, et cetera,
Yeah.
et cetera. But at home it's hard to implement that and it's harder to learn and understand material.
Yeah,
And
not
I
to sorry, just to cut you off. Not to mention,
it's all right.
I'm sorry. Some students like their home life is not the greatest, and so sometimes
Yeah,
schools are a almost a refuge from their homes.
yeah,
Whether that be abuse of different types of things like that. So just wanted to add
yeah.
that.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. I think schools are a vital place where like those problems are kind of recognized and it's a safe space for students to go where they like feel that they can be open and then ask for help whenever they need. And that's a good transition into this next topic I'm about to talk about, like high schoolers and then like depression and the pandemic,
Hmm.
right? So there was a study by the National Library of Medicine that was conducted amongst high schoolers, and 14.4% of teenagers reported post-traumatic stress disorder, and 40.4% reported having depression and anxiety throughout the pandemic and like in response to the pandemic.
Yeah.
That is an incredible amount of of teenagers, and it's an alarming amount because a lot of that has to do with decreased social interaction, whereas like you're stuck at home, you have a lot of time where you're just alone and you feel so isolated because the isolation was kind of stress during the pandemic.
Yeah.
So you see a lot of increases in life satisfaction, mental health, and that affects high schoolers and just like students in general
Mm-hmm.
and their academic performance and everything else like that. Because, but like on the flip side, you can see because what you mentioned, you had less time in school, you have a lot more time to go do things that you personally enjoy or passion projects that you have,
Mm-hmm.
right? Going outside, like, away from other people, but like going outside, spending time in nature,
Yeah.
working on things that you never got time to work on,
Yeah.
kind of like doing a lot of self reflection. And
Creating
I
a
think
podcast. Yeah.
exactly, yeah. And I think that a lot of experiences differ from person to person. Whereas I can say that I had a lot of time to further my languages. I
Yeah.
studied
Yeah.
Japanese, I
Yeah.
studied Chinese, whereas another person might be suffering, and it's hard for us to check up on those people when we can't see them in person because it's so much easier just to say like, oh hey, how are you doing, blah 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 blah. You don't actually see their face and like how they're acting, and you can't notice if anything's wrong, and so you never think to check up on them. That's why like towards like the middle to the latter half of the pandemic, a lot of that stuff is like check up on your friends, blah 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 blah. That stuff was stressed because a lot of people were realizing that with this pandemic came increased depression, increased mental health disorders, and I think that's something that's important to highlight because it's not just because we were away from school that grades started to decline.
Yeah, I feel like that statistic is alarming, yet at the same time, sadly, it's not surprising.
Yeah,
Um, just because the people, like you said, they were isolated. Some people like
yeah,
didn't devote their time to passion projects, or they didn't occupy themselves, so they were sitting around, doing, or a lot of people, what they tended to move towards is they did a lot of social media. And so TikTok was very popular, around the pandemic, and so people fed their minds with like information that I guess was mentally straining, um, because being on social media all day has been shown, or has been linked to increased depression levels,
yeah.
because you're really like pretty much mirroring yourself to these people that are essentially fake. Like they're only presenting
I
the best
agree.
side
Yeah,
of themselves, and so it's
exactly.
it's like a, why can't I be this person, and so you're doubting your abilities and you're doubting yourself. I can be
Yeah,
guilty of that sometimes, scrolling throughout, and I have to remind myself, um, it's not, you don't see the full side of things. You only are shown, it's only what you're shown that really see, that is what you see. So
yeah,
not only that, um, but again, like you said, you can't see other people's faces. All you can see is their eyes, and so it's very difficult to kind of make assumptions on how they're feeling based off of their eyes and their, like, the top half of their face structure. I feel like we've gotten better at it though. But still, sometimes you don't even know if somebody's smiling, somebody's sad, somebody's crying.
yeah,
It's
yeah,
very difficult to see, and so there's less checkups on people. Um, there's less communication with people. There's less people getting help because of COVID, shutting down a lot of practices and things like that.
yeah,
Um, so there's just a lot of aspects that have stemmed from COVID. Um, I feel like we are better prepared, number one, for hypothetically if we need to, go virtual again, or if we need to really change the way our school um,
yeah.
just functions really. We did
Mhm.
a pretty decent job, in my opinion, about switching from you know in person to hybrid to virtual and things like
Yeah,
that. I feel like we
yeah,
did a good job. But yeah, just like you said, there's a lot of depression statistics about that. But not to mention, right? There's like a fear factor of returning back to school, and like some people were very afraid of returning back due to their immunocompromised state and things like that. People
yeah.
were afraid of, what if I contract COVID and things like that. And I'm saying things like that a lot, but mass amounts. I don't know about for your school, but there were mass amounts. Like I remember, there were mass amounts of people that would get called, that were
Oh yeah,
contact
like
traced.
contact trace.
Yeah,
Yeah,
like it just happened like rapid fire. I mean, these assistant principals, just had a side job, a side hustle where they were contact tracing, professional contact tracers. Because I mean, when one person had it, I mean, 65 other people got contact traced. And so it's just like routine. You get, the announcement and you hear 70 different names. It's just so many names and all get contact traced and things like it's just hard to hear sometimes. And so this was before like there were any vaccines or anything like that. So some people were immunocompromised or had family that were immunocompromised, and so the fear factor of what if I take COVID, I may not show symptoms, but what if I take it to my family members, and what if they get COVID, and what if they possibly die from it, you know?
Yeah, yeah. I think that was a lot of like why
And
people
that's
didn't want
why
to go to
some
school.
people in the 2021-2022 year, no, sorry, the 2020-2021 year, decided to go virtual just to prevent any possible, like disease infection rates or anything like that. So
Yeah, yeah, I agree. And like I know a lot of my friends, we were kind of scared of going back to school, and we shared our concerns with our teachers because I know like I didn't want to get COVID, and like my brother is immunocompromised, and I didn't want to bring it back, and like I didn't want him to get it there because
yeah,
like it's gonna be harder for him.
yeah,
And so I know a lot of people had their parents or their grandparents or great grandparents. They were all like they were all susceptible to like if they got COVID, it wouldn't be pretty. And so like when we were weaning towards in person, what we did was we went in person for 2 weeks and then we canceled it. We went back to hybrid because the infection rate skyrocketed. And you would think that we learned by now, but like you know,
yeah,
right now at least it's died down, especially in the where I am. But
hmm,
that's a good thing.
yeah.
And
Let's
I
not
agree
jinx it.
with
Let's
you.
not
Like
jinx it.
yeah, I agree with you. Like the fear factor to go back to school, but I also recognize that a lot of people are like you could make the argument that like people just didn't want to go back to school because like they didn't want to go back to school. Like I personally loved hybrid because you got the satisfaction of being at school with your friends and then also having those breaks
Hmm.
at home, but also being able to learn from that. And a lot of people are like, oh well, kids just want to stay home. Well, that's not true because most of the people I asked would rather go in person every day than stay virtual.
Yeah.
You know?
And so
Yeah.
the benefits of hybrid are really um, that you get the best of both worlds. Um,
Yeah.
at least personally for me, I enjoyed hybrid a lot because
I did too.
some days I was able to sleep in, some days I was able to get my work done.
Yeah.
So not
Yeah.
only am I able to get instruction that is very centered around me, not general
Yeah.
education with the in person learning, but I was also
I
able
agree.
to be a little bit more relaxed and be able to take things a lot easier and explore my passions um,
Yeah.
during virtual. And I had a lot more time to do what I enjoyed. Um, it's just fun.
Yeah. I agree.
I don't know about fun, but it was an experience that um, I definitely thought of as something that it will shape me, and it has shaped me into the person that I am today for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. And I went, okay, so I went to this one program called RILA, so like Rotary Youth
Yeah,
Leadership
I'm doing that
Association, like
next
over the
year.
summer.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's really nice because like you get to meet a bunch of like-minded, driven, and passionate students and like get to do activities and like work on your leadership skills like that. But one of the things that they said that they sent in the loot box, because I had to do it virtually since it was still COVID, and so they sent in the loot box was a bunch of these like slime things or some and like some fidget things, because they were saying something that I never really thought about, that like this generation, especially growing up with so much like technology and also COVID and like so many things, we can multitask very well.
Yeah.
It's hard to keep our brain occupied with one thing, so we need to be doing something else to kind of like focus our attention. And I think a lot of times, like especially during this virtual schooling, we needed to have something there and not just focus on one thing. And
Hmm.
so that's when the appeal of using our phones came in, or like the appeal of, like watching a video at the same time or playing a video game. Like
Yeah.
we're trying to satiate that need for um, like a fidget or something
Or
else to
something
occupy
attentive,
our thing. And yeah, to keep our attention, but we're finding unhealthy outlets of doing so.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
like when you're in school, you can have those things like in your hand. Like I know a lot of my friends have some of that, and so like personally, I don't need it, but like I always find myself like wandering around, like standing up to try to keep myself focused because I need to be doing something to like, yeah. But like it's hard to do that over virtual,
Yeah,
because
yeah.
everything's so like monotone, repetitive, and it
Everything,
gets gloomy after long
especially when you're in an environment where you sleep in, it's hard to
enough.
separate. It's good to separate, like where you work in and where you sleep in, but when that
Yeah.
gets lumped together, your
Yes.
brain kind of perceives it as something. Hey, it's time to go to sleep,
Oh,
or it's time to be tired,
yeah,
or it's
yeah,
time to occupy yourself. So, like my bed's, like right next to me, right? That's not too great.
yeah.
And so I've used like some kind of mind tricks to keep it a little bit separate.
Uh-huh.
Um, but I mean, still, I still have the temptation every now and then to just jump on the bed and just lay there. You know what I
Yeah.
mean?
Yeah, yeah,
Um,
yeah, yeah.
so
Yeah. And
go ahead.
sorry, keep going. No, you go ahead.
I was gonna say like the proper separation of like your home life and like your school life or your work life
Mhm.
is
Yeah.
something that's so imperative. But
Yeah.
I guess going back to what you said, like there was there was like a deep need to, I guess, like keep your attention
Mhm.
throughout like when you're virtual. Like I have
I
my phone
agree.
right here, and I'm using a
Mhm.
computer. What's stopping me from searching something up, or sitting on the bed, watching a movie or whatever? It's
Yeah.
very difficult to satiate that urge. And what a lot of people turn to, some people made that positively, and so the people that said that the pandemic was a positive experience, they most likely dedicated their time to something that was like beneficial, or something that was like a passion project of theirs, something.
Yeah.
Got a lot of stuff out of the pandemic that I really wouldn't have normally.
I agree. I did
um
too. Yeah. I met so many new people, got so many new
yeah,
experiences. Yeah.
but like there's also people that are use that time um to go on social media. Like I said,
Mhm.
it's a
Yeah.
very destructive environment or atmosphere there.
Yeah.
um
Yeah.
and so when you're on that for a long long time, it does take a toll over time.
Yeah, I agree. And I think that it's kind of important to talk about sleep. My sleep schedule during virtual school was
Oh,
so bad because like in my mind I was like, oh, tomorrow it's just school on my computer. I don't really have to pay attention sometimes. Like with my class, I don't really have to pay attention because I already can speak what I can speak a lot of Chinese, blah 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 blah. That's what I was thinking. But then like when I stayed up late till 1 a.m. to 2 a.m. regularly and I was waking up, it was so hard to switch back. And my like I was like I saw a significant decrease in my happiness because I wasn't getting enough sleep and I was on my phone a lot more at night. And I know a lot of people who messed up their sleep schedules like that. I have a lot of friends who like would go to bed like 4 a.m. and wake up at like 12 and then go to school. Like that's not healthy. That is clearly not healthy. And
yeah.
since it was so normalized during the pandemic, it's so hard to switch when we went back to in person or when we had to do something and that required a lot of our attention because it like we're so tired that like our mind isn't able to focus on that thing.
It's great that you mentioned that, because my sleep schedule wasn't the worst. I mean, it did get bad at one point, and so I had to I eventually set like a very strict schedule for myself,
Yeah.
because I cannot function without 7 8 hours of sleep. So I would have to go to bed at some point, but my sleep schedule was pretty bad. Especially because now it's just on the weekends I just I would sleep whenever I want, but
Yeah.
it's carried over because I really used to be somebody that prioritized sleep and everything, but COVID has made it less of a, you know get your sleep in, and more of sleep is just something that is hindering me from doing what I want. And so why can't I just use this time to go on my phone instead of
Yeah.
sleeping? So occupying my time, I was not the greatest during was not the greatest during COVID, for sure. I occupied it in different ways instead of sleep. But
Yeah.
I got
And
better
yeah.
eventually. So because
No, yeah,
my
that's
body
good.
really was like, hey, you probably need to get some sleep. Your body really speaks for you. Sometimes you just need to listen to it. Um,
Yeah,
so
I
I mean,
agree.
my body was like, you need sleep, and I was like, you're totally right. Let me get some sleep in. So I
Yeah.
fixed my sleep schedule.
Yeah, I think that sleep is a really like important thing when it came to COVID and the effects of that because it negatively affected me as well, and so I tried to. It was really hard to like switch back, and it took me like a week or two. But yeah, when I got to school, like there's something else that I noticed. This final thing I just want to mention, that like teacher respect
Yeah.
amongst students. I Not just me, but also teachers, because I talked to some of the teachers about like transitioning and what their thoughts on it was, and they were saying like they noticed that students did not have as much respect. Like they would talk while the teacher was talking or be on their phones, and like a lot of that is because it was so normalized to like just go on mute or turn off your camera, play on your phone while the teacher's talking. It's disrespectful, number one, and number two, you're harming yourself and like the classroom environment because you're being distracting. And I still today, there's the effects of that still linger, because like I even see it in my own classes, and I'm like, come on, the least you can do is respect the teacher's time, because like they're already not getting paid enough,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And they're working really hard to do this for you.
Yeah.
And I think that's just something that isn't really talked about, because like it's something that the teachers talk about that they don't really want to like.
Yeah,
A
it's
lot of
not
teachers don't like tell
publicized
the students
really.
that.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
I definitely agree. Teacher respect for sure decreased because some teachers, and I don't know if this is just a stereotype or what, but some teachers are really not that good at technology. And so the switch from like in person education to virtual education was really a big hurdle for them. And so
yeah,
like I guess like the generational gap between us and them just made us think like, oh, if they can't, do this, like why should we really listen to them? And
yeah,
so the attention span decreased, which in turn, I guess teachers perceive that as like a decline in respect.
yeah.
Um,
I agree.
and I guess it kind of carried over when we went in person. It just kind of remained like nothing really changed.
Yeah, I agree. And with that, our discussion comes to an end. We thank you for listening and hope you'll stay tuned for future episodes. Don't forget to follow the Pepper Podcast on Instagram, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and YouTube. Thank you.
Thank you.